XBRL mandate, for those who are familiar. They've mandated
XBRL, Extensible Business
reporting
language. We're trying to create a jargon-free environment.
Sorry. Extensible business reporting language. But that mandate that they put in place a couple of years ago, all companies now, at least Fortune 1500 at the moment, are submitting their 10Qs and 10Ks using XBRL. Using our tools, that information is now readily available to anyone that wants to go and pull that data online. So we have a cross-view of the product we have that's out there on our website. You can go and look at any 10Q or 10K file and pull the data out of it. There are RSS feeds that come out of the SEC, so you can build your own applications to consume that data. That's what transparency is. You can get to the information readily, easily, and because it's using XBRL and standardized taxonomies, it's ensuring that you have comparative information across companies. So the data for one company is using exactly the same taxonomy in another company, so it's readily comparable. And if we can extend that capability, imagine extending that into sustainability indicators, that then gives us, as a community, the ability to readily pull that information and have visibility to, from a comparative standpoint, what companies are doing and how they compare. We give Eric credit for this. We were chatting last night, and he said, imagine if you had an iPhone app when you're in the store and you can hold that iPhone up and scan the barcode of the item you're about to buy, a can of baked beans, and it tells you what the sustainability metrics are for that company. And you can scan their competitors and you get the same information for that competitor, and you can choose to buy the baked beans not based on price, but actually based on sustainability indicators. And that sort of information then starts to drive the behavior of the companies. So it's making that information really consumable and something that we can act on and drive behavior is where we need to get to.
And we're getting into this later, where the financial data disclosures now that you're collecting the XBRL are mandatory now.
Correct.
And the sustainability, the environmental impacts are voluntary. Is that correct?
Exactly right. And that's where you see the deficiency, obviously. So having the mandate has forced companies to use XBRL and has now created this wealth of information and knowledge that's out there to be consumed for financials, not for sustainability.
There are groups like the Carbon Disclosure Project that are out there trying to guilt companies into reporting their carbon disclosures, for example, or their water usage. But it's all voluntary.
Exactly.
They don't have that big a hammer.
So that comes back to answering your question. Technology doesn't solve everything. You still need the mandate to make people do it. But the technology enables the mandate.
There you go. The technology enables regulation. Let's go over to Greg Janicek. Greg, I was sitting in New York City about 10 days ago with Manny Chirico, who's the CEO of Phillips Van Heusen, which is the world's second largest apparel company. They own Tommy Hilfiger, Izod, and a bunch of other apparel companies. The news came, we're sitting in the office, the news comes through, he's handed an envelope, he opens it up, and he says, I've got to excuse myself. Turns out there was a giant factory fire in their factory in Bangladesh that they share with Gap, JCPenney, and Abercrombie and Fitch. At least a dozen workers were killed at the time in the report that he read. Now it turned out there was 24 workers were killed. Over 100 were severely injured. Now that's a supply chain nightmare, Greg Janicek. Is there a technology fix for this kind of horror? Or in your opinion, Greg, is technology inadequate to limit this type of supply chain risk?
Well, I hope there'd be better technology around fire prevention to keep that from happening. I guess litigators will figure that one out. Interesting question as it relates, and I think retail is a good example to use to answer that. If you look at the retail industry, it has a big peak, right? End of the year, holiday season takes off, called Black Friday. Genesis of that is that it's the time when retailers actually start making money. A lot of people are showing up to the store and they're spending money. Or if you're from Europe, it's called Boxing Day, I believe. But at the end of the day, these retailers have to build capacity for that peak, whether it's stores, infrastructure, warehouses, data centers, etc. They build for that peak. So as an example, Amazon would sell 2 million items a day on a regular day. At peak, they're selling 10 million items a day. So there's this tremendous gap between your standard operating procedure and your peak. And that gap, you can't have happen come peak, so you have to build for the peak capacity. So to answer the question specifically is that if there was a disaster during peak, there's no way you can do anything about it. If there's a disaster in the summer doldrums, then yes, we could do something about it. But as that ties to conservation, I think Amazon, and I don't work there anymore, so I'm not pitching for them, but they've done some very, very innovative things to help drive down, and it's all around utilization. So if you have a warehouse and you're the only one using that warehouse, you've got to build that thing for 10 million orders a day. If you're sharing that with many other companies and industries, which they do, if you manufacture anything, you can send it to Amazon's warehouse and they'll fulfill it for you, then the gap between doldrums of summer and peak is much tighter, and you're saving money, your footprint's smaller. And they're doing a very, very powerful thing with their cloud computing business, where typically a server sitting there in a data center uses almost as much power, whether it's 20% utilized or 100%. And every company around the world has their own data center. Now what Amazon's doing is they're opening up all their data centers, any company that wants to use their hardware. And what that's doing is driving the utilization of the hardware from 20% up to 80, 90, 95% utilization. And these are things that I think Amazon should do a better job of bragging about, because they are definitely green. I mean, you're building one data center instead of 5, and the footprint is much, much less in that case.
Aaron Mizan from Interface. Let's stay with that Bangladesh fire example, and even toss in the Japanese nuclear power plant meltdown that's happening right as we speak. Now, Interface's factories make stuff that can burn and theoretically hurt people, and I'm sure you practice these emergency scenarios periodically. Now, what's your role, Aaron, in this type of emergency planning? And briefly, how do you plan for this type of disaster? What's the reporting protocol for when tragedies like this happen?
So there's like 5 questions there. All right, so I'm going to go in order. The first is that I'll give some perspective on reporting, but I'll say, sort of in the interest of disclosure, I'm not hugely involved with a lot of the safety and planning, largely because in our company, we still have some pretty conventional roles, and one is we have an environmental / regulatory / safety person, and so the vast majority of sort of that focus rests with that. The second is that the company is very decentralized. So